Hello, my name is John Kranz with Compass Games, and I want to welcome Ty Bomba. He's the editor and also the designer regarding our latest issue, Paper Wars 108, which is now shipping. People are literally receiving it as we do this quick impromptu conversation. We're going to talk about Paper Wars 108 and the insert game, which is 3D Days. Ty, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me back.
Sure thing. So I thought what I could do is I'll just share my screen here briefly, as I thought we could go through and talk about what's included in Paper Wars issue 108. So I'm going to share a view here of the actual magazine issue itself, 108. Obviously, we can see the title of the game here, 3D Days, which we'll talk about in a moment. But what I'd like to do is if you could guide us, gently walk us through the contents of this issue, what's all covered. Might be a little hard for you to see. Maybe I'll just go one size larger here as far as the view. But yeah, it's not meant to be really legible, but happy to go through it. Okay, great.
Okay, well, the rest of the issue, other than the game, filled with the various progress reports from you and the other people at Compass. Big design deep dive on a game called Trench Raid by its designer, Lisa Smedman. Okay. You know, unusual right there, a female wargame designer.
Yeah.
I do not know her, but her article is really excellent. Obviously, in submitting it, she really revealed herself to be talented. The game it initially reminded me of was one from GDW back in the early 80s called Trenchfoot.
Trenchfoot from GDW, right. Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Worst box game cover ever. If you want to go to BGG and see a real bad box game cover, look up Trenchfoot.
Oh boy, maybe I'll zoom in on the table of contents here where everybody can see it. Maybe that's a good idea. Yeah. So here on the left column is your editorial, and then I'll let you just sort of walk through the different things as you were just doing now. So I'll let you do that.
Right. So a man-to-man game of combat in World War I, handled in a really smooth operating way, I believe. Looking forward to seeing that.
Yeah.
Then Grenada, Last Stand of the Moors. Interesting thing about that, we had an earlier article on it, and both times I got several emails from people saying, I never would have bought this game, but I read that article.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so it's exactly
excellent.
What I'm trying to do here. So
excellent.
Yeah. Then we have errata counters for the Case Geld variants that we published in 104.
Okay.
They went ahead and did them as die cuts. That was a pleasant surprise. I was only anticipating it'd be P&P, but they're full-size die cuts. And then we had a couple of errata counters back in the Battle of Inkerman.
Yep.
3D Days developer notes by Dr. Robert Smitty Smith. He's a well-known gamer on Facebook and on BGG.
Yep.
He served as a developer for the game, and I was very impressed with that. When I originally showed him the game, he wasn't that interested. But then when I sort of coaxed him into going into it, he, as he writes in his notes, he did not realize all the possibilities inherent in the Western Front, 1942, 43, 44.
Yeah.
So
that's an interesting article. Yeah.
Sullivan Brook operational analysis, option rules and counters. This is by a guy named Aaron Danis, who has also helped me on the various variants that I'm coming up with, have been coming up with for the World War II campaign games in the new edition. He's one of these guys who not only has a talent to design and craft rules, but he's a brilliant player. And
great.
Those are the guys I kind of dislike, because you always meet them at a convention and then they beat your ass off in some game. He's absolutely brilliant. And
awesome.
Again, he had optional counters, which they went ahead and provided as die cuts. So if you're interested in the Brook game, that's what you want. Stellar Horizons interview with the designer. I've also got another interview with Andrew coming up for the newer edition of the game that's coming out.
Oh, great. Stellar Horizons too. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, so we'll get into that. Players' notes for Second Fallujah by Steve Leesky. That is another game that has gotten more play than I thought it was originally going to, because it's kind of another one of a big battle in America's lost wars. But the people really liking the system. So this is the first try American Bomber. This is somewhat more entertainment than informational value. It's an after-action report written as if you were written from the perspective of a guy who from Dennis from the American Bomber game.
Yeah,
and it's written in the first person as if the guy had actually flown the mission and now has come back and he's providing his after action report. He missed because just before he got there, the American fighter shot out his bombing equipment, his inside.
And that's a Gregory Smith. That's a Gregory Smith solitaire game. He's done a lot of solitaire games for Compass. Yeah.
And then Santiago 1898 player aid charts, just some more visual aids to help you organize the pieces on that, and the various project updates from Julian, and you of course have one in here. I like to compliment you. Of all the people at Compass headquarters, you always get yours in first for every issue, and so
and I have one that's due to you this week. So I saw your. I'm most beholden to you. So no, hopefully folks find that interesting, and I'll zoom out. Just what I'd like to do for everybody, I think it'll be helpful, is just to show all the pages. So I'll just sort of scroll through. So this is the beginning fold, and just to go through the pages here. So here's Trench Raid, the deep dive by, again, as you mentioned, so interesting. Having a new female designer working with us is great. So we have the deep designer dive there, which goes on here to the following pages. And there's also a picture of Lisa, which is nice touch for the interviews. And then, as you mentioned, Grenada. So we have that article as well. With some pictures, really interesting to see the pictures as well during gameplay. And then there's some mention here of the, which I'll show here in a moment, Ty, is the bonus counters for the other games that are in insert as well. I'll be sure to show that. Here's Smitty's developer notes for 3D Days, which we're going to get in here in a moment, which is the insert game. And folks can see here on the right side, that's the actual start of the rule booklet. So we've got the rules here for the game right here. I think there's some charts and tables at the very end, as well as the front image of the counter sheet, which is a nice touch. And then the analysis by Aaron Danis, who's also local to me. He's a great guy. Yeah, really interested in Tobruk. So he did his analysis, and we included those counters as well for Assault on Tobruk, which is right here. Very nice. I still need to read that article. I'm very interested in that. Some optional rules and consolidated errata. There's the Andrew Rader interview you just mentioned for the original Stellar Horizons, and you've got one coming up, as you mentioned, for Stellar Horizons 2. Steve Liskey's Second Fallujah on the right page there. American Bomber as you said, entertaining after action report there is on the right starting. And then Santiago's player aid charts revised for the game, which is a very nice touch for that earlier Paper Wars issue. And some project updates, and the most important part of all, just kidding.
Exactly.
No, it's the future issues, and we're going to talk about future issues at the end, because I know there were. Well, actually, let's just knock it out. So let's talk a little bit, since we're talking about this issue 108 of Paper Wars. Let's talk a little bit now, Ty, about any upcoming changes that are happening to the release schedule for Paper Wars. So why don't you go ahead and inform us all what's happening on that front?
Right. We lost the games that were scheduled for 113 and 114. Putin stumbles, the Battle of Kharkov, and Autumn Mist. We had to reschedule those, drop from the lineup, and substitute 2 new games. For 113, Bill Thomas picked, with my total agreement, a new edition of Inchon, MacArthur's Gambit.
Great.
And for the people attending Facebook, we've already got up the V1 maps and counters for that. That won the Charles S. Roberts Award back in 1991 when it came out as the best post-World War II game. And the thing is, back in those days, they didn't distinguish between magazine games and box games, and so it was, we were taken by surprise. And everybody likes that game, So very few structural changes. Artistic changes, and we were able to, by enlarging the hexes, we were able to go from a 1/2-inch counters up to the 5/8-inch counters. So I think you'll enjoy that. And then also in that issue, a second counter sheet in which I've got a variant for the World War II campaign's 1940 game called December 1944, which is just a 3-turn game, but it covers the German counteroffensive on the Western Front at the core level, 2-player, or it will play well solitaire. And then the other one is Luke Coatney's variant for 1941 called The Big Solution. In 111, we're presenting one called the Little Solution. And that was, I came up with those names, but he couldn't think of anybody.
Good name. I like how
He
you
just had a,
delivered it too. Your oratory was very good. Had a little
he,
pizzazz to it. The big solution.
in the 111 variant, he just came up with a few additional counters and a few
Okay.
suggested rules changes. But then for the 113, after we got talking about 111, he sort of basically redesigned the whole game. We got a whole new counter set, new
Okay.
charts, tables. So essentially, it's a totally souped up version. So you can play the little solution or the big solution. You know?
Gotcha. Right.
And then in 114, I don't have a cover to show you this yet. Paul Stufauer is
Okay.
working on it, but the game we have coming there is by Adam Starkweather, and it will be a standalone scenario for his combat series of
Ah,
games.
wonderful. Wonderful.
And it will cover the, I'm not sure the pronunciation of this, but it's the Battle of Bretoncourt on June 6th.
Okay.
If you saw the Band of Brothers episode #2 when the paratroopers go into Normandy, they take that German artillery placement.
Okay.
Okay, it's not that clear in the TV series, but the paratroopers were actually outnumbered there, and they went on the attack. And through superior leadership and fortitude, they took that battery, which was shelling Utah Beach. And so to this day, that is studied around the world as a classic example of small unit elite tactics. And so that will be our game here. You will command the American paratroopers, and the system will run the Germans. As soon as I get a
Great.
cover back from Paul, probably in a few more days, I'll get it up on Facebook.
Perfect. Yeah, so some changes, but it sounds like some nice
I think
good
they'll be
adjustments there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll promote those on the website when we get closer to those releases. I'll
Sure.
definitely do that. So that's awesome. Well, let's do this. Let's really get into the meat of the discussion now. So as a reminder to everybody, this is Paper Wars issue 108, which we're showing here from our product page. 3D days, meaning it's just not one battle we're talking about. It's historically, it's 44, but Ty, I'll let you take it away and provide just a good elevator pitch overview of what this issue game is all about.
Right. In this game goes back in my mind to, there was two games that were the parent for this. In 1972, a guy, old SPI published John Young's Grande Armée.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you remember that. And the system was such that you would have, let's say you had like 3 divisions, the units of maneuver divisions. You bring them together in the same hex. You could then remove the 3 divisions and substitute a core counter, which was slower but gave you a combat strength bonus of about 25%. I use the same principle in this game, except the standard units of maneuver are core, and you can bring 3 core together and get a souped up army at 25%. And what I liked about that is it's a real simple way of getting at logistics. That is, it shows that by concentrating, you can, instead of having to supply units to boost up these various unit strengths, you just get a substitute counter. It's stronger. And then, of course, you sacrifice some mobility.
Yeah.
Now, as you can imagine, there are periods in the game when that's real handy, like in the historic battle for Normandy, when you had a couple of turns there where the front was largely static. You have a time to build up your armies and you get that enhanced power. But then, of course, you have Cobra, and all of a sudden it's time to run, so you want to get back to the core level. And like I say, it makes for a nice, easy way to cover what could be really complex logistics otherwise. So that was sort of the systemic parent, was La Grande Armée from old SPI. And then that same year, there was a game from an independent outfit called Histo Games.
Histo Games.
They were in Brooklyn, I believe. A guy named Lawrence Riziki. Huh. And he came in 1944, and he came up with the idea of covering these 3 different invasions, 42, 43, 44. Okay. He did it using a system that was basically Avalon Hill's D-Day classic system. And, there was nothing wrong with that, especially for the time. But I mean, so I took the system from La Grande Armée and, put it with his thinking and came up with this. So what we have here is 3 games, that cover the fact that the debate on when to land in Northwest Europe was one of the key decisions of World War II, which, can be argued, molded Western history up until the fall of the Soviet Union, was whether to land in 42, 43, or 44.
Right.
So by using the same system, players can get a very easy comparison between the capabilities of these armies in each year, because the 3 counter sets are totally distinct. That is, you don't have to sort through it and pick out this unit for this scenario. Each of the 3 scenarios has a totally distinct counter set identified on the back, 42, 43, or 44. And then the rules, each scenario has specific rules. The strength of the core vary. in general, the German corps go down in value and the Allied corps go up in value. But so in 1942, the assumption is that perhaps due to the fact that the Germans are doing better over in Russia than they did historically, they decide to go through and instead of landing in North Africa, land directly on the Channel coast, either in Brittany or in Normandy. So what you have there is the historic order of battle that the Allies initially send into Northwest Africa in Operation Torch, instead being sent to France in Normandy or Brittany. The German order of battle, of course, they had those the forces that they historically sent to Tunisia with the Panzer Army was in France, and so they're right there to begin with. In fact, one of their Panzer Corps headquartered at Saint-Lô at the time.
Okay.
So it's not a big breakout. Essentially, what the Allies are trying to do is either they get ashore in Brittany or Normandy, and they're trying to create a viable front so that you can hold against the inevitable German counterattack that's coming. The idea being that once you establish this strategic-sized bridgehead that can't be overthrown, that will then force the Germans to step down in Russia. So that's 42. Now, in 1943, the assumption is that after the fall of Tunisia, the Allies commit to going into Northwest France, into Northwest Europe. So you've got the order of battle that the Allies had for Sicily and Salerno instead being projected into France in 1943. This one is very interesting in that we don't know how Hitler will react. That is, you land there and he may order Rundstedt to simply go ahead and fight the campaign with what he's got available, in which case it's very interesting. The forces in France in 43, unreinforced, were weaker than they were in 1944. They didn't have as many panzers, and so you may get
a better shot.
Nice breakout. But what you do is at turn one you roll the die and you find out if Hitler. And one option he had was that he could have pulled back to the Rigaud-Dessau line this was Eisenhower's big fear if they had invaded then, that he would pull back to the shortest line available, which was Rigaud-Dessau, which Eisenhower estimated would have freed up about 30 divisions from the Eastern Front, 15 of them mechanized class. So if Hitler decides to do that, that means you're facing an attack by probably two panzer armies. You're going to come swiftly away. Plus, you got another good army down in Italy, which you can now send as reinforcements since you're not invading there. The German forces in Italy can also come in as reinforcements. So that can turn into a slugfest. Further, since the German fighter arm was not, the Luftwaffe fighter arm was not crushed historically until March 1944, he may also order the Luftwaffe Reich Air Defense Force to sortie into France, and so it can be a real mess, you know.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, and what I also was showing earlier, which I wanted to sort of zoom in on here, was, and I think this was caught in the developer notes by Smitty, was the interesting approach you took, where the attack differentials change based on the year or the different games, the 3 different years. Allies are definitely stronger in 44 on the CRT, whereas the Germans are stronger in the earlier years. So it's interesting how you've sort of interwoven that in a very smooth, streamlined way, how to sort of account for the different capabilities, combat effectiveness throughout those different periods.
You're dealing at corps and army level, so it's kind of hard to show tactical and operational differentiation, but this, I think, works nicely to do it. The Allies are gradually getting better at those levels, and the Germans, outside of their few elite panzer units, are gradually getting worse. And so you get that with column shifts. Some people find that oversimplified. My feeling is if you want a game you can finish in an afternoon, that's the way you have to go.
Way you have to go with it. Yeah.
The 1944 scenario is in essence the historic scenario, except you're not required to invade in Normandy. You can invade anywhere you want. It goes from D-Day up through the end of September, and the idea is that I cut it off there because that was a distinct campaign from what followed, of course.
Okay.
And again, the idea is you're trying to get a knockout blow as the Allied player, get to the Ruhr, essentially do better than the Allies did historically in September 44, and then. What this game really points out, the Luftwaffe is now out of the sky, so it's no longer air power, and First Allied Airborne Army is now available. In the historical article I included, the amazing thing about it was after they break out from Normandy, it seemed to me the Allied army suffered from what might be called victory disease, which is usually blamed on the Japanese in the first months of 1942, where they just sort of went wild, and instead of having a coherent plan, they just ran off in all directions, and because of that, they were unable to consolidate their initial victories. Well, here the Allies, when they break out in Operation Cobra, suffer from a similar kind of victory fever. However, they do it not by spreading themselves thin, but by monomaniacally become focused on the Ruhr and just charging toward the Rhine River and the Ruhr, with the idea that, well, I'll get to the Ruhr, that's 90% of German steel production. You can't fight World War II without steel. We win. Yeah. Well, the trouble with that was there were 3 German armies, the 15th on the Pas de Calais, the 1st down at the Bay of Biscay, and the 19th down in the Mediterranean, which, because of that concentration toward the Ruhr, they are allowed to escape. So all those armies, all 3 of those armies could have had Eisenhower ordered it, could have been caught and destroyed, which would have, the Germans never would have had the troops available to form a front in September. But they, I mean, incredibly, 15th Army escapes across the Scheldt estuary, approximately 9 infantry divisions. They lost not a single barge when they did that. I mean, think of all the naval assets.
How's that possible? Not a single barge was. I don't know how that's possible.
Think of the naval assets that the Allies had available in the North Sea.
Crazy.
Just nobody did it, and the admirals they didn't want to go into those coastal waters, and what will let air power do it? Well, okay, in September the weather goes bad, so for 9 out of 10 days where the thing was going on, they basically couldn't get any air power up. And so in one of the books I put in the bibliography for the game, Rückzug, it's a history of the campaign written from German records. It's in English, but written from the German perspective. And they did not lose a single barge getting that army across there. And so the whole army is delivered. That's the army that basically, could form the backbone of what the British are to fight against during Market Garden just a few weeks later. And then you take 19th Army coming up out of the Mediterranean, and the Allies put together an ad hoc paratroop brigade to try and cut them off. But basically, there was a Panzer division they were able to break through and get past them. Now, they used 1st Allied Airborne Army there to block off 19th Army instead of in Market Garden. They could have annihilated that entire army. And 1st Army was even further behind them. And so, what I'm getting at here, there's a lot of different outcomes. The way the war went in the West in 1944 was not the way it had to go. And I think it's one of the fascinating what-if debates about that campaign still. It was just, a really interesting, Eisenhower, when he wrote his order for the advance coming out of Cobra, he starts out, he goes, look, I'm not really interested in taking objectives. Let's destroy these German forces, and then the objectives will fall for us. Okay. Then he goes on the next paragraph, and he says, but I'd really like you to give priority to taking Antwerp and the Ruhr.
Make up your mind. Which is it?
All these pieces, yeah.
And then here, I got the counter sheet just to share with everybody. We've, as you mentioned, all the counters are organized by the different 3 games by the year. So we've got up at the very top, we've got the 1942 set of counters. So you can sort of see the British, American, German colors. And then same for the 1943 scenario down here in the left bottom section. And then 44 top right, we can see. So we've got those 3 sets of counters. And I was showing previously the back sides, like you said, is really convenient and handy. So you know which game the counters go to. We put the year or what game, and if there's a reinforcement or additional information about placement, that's added there as well. So that's a really nice touch, I think, to the counters to have that information on the back of the counters
when you
punch them out.
When you first punch them out, if you just put it in 3 separate bags, you then won't have to sort them again. That's
right. Exactly.
I hate these games where you want to play this scenario, so now you got to get the whole counter set out. Now we got to pick this and that and that. And that. There's 3 counter sets there, so.
And then I did want to touch upon just real quickly here. I'm just navigating to the bonus counters in the game. I thought that might be a good idea. I'll show the fronts of them. So this is what's included in the magazine. So we have that article, for example, on Assault on Tobruk. Those are the top section. I'll go real big here so people can see it.
Those are my counters.
Yeah, this is the front side. This is the front side, and there is a back side. But here's the front of the mounted. It's mounted die-cut counters, and then here we also have the K-scaled and the Inkerman, which is your design as well. So we've got
the the increment is errata fixes, and then the two
Yep.
bombers on the side were a variant by
American
Gregory
bomber.
Smith.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, not for American bomber, for K-Scale that puts in strategic air warfare.
Yep.
And
Yep.
then over here, this is for a variant that you could play out Mississippi Bonsai scenario on the K-Scale map.
Oh, nice. Yeah, which was I remember that title from XTR days. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's very
The
cool.
assumption is they've won the war. Now they're going to fight each other.
Good. Why let the party end, right? That's awesome. So yeah, so that's the bonus counter sheet. That's extra counters that are included with the game. So I thought that was worth sharing. So talking about the game itself, so since there's 3 games in there for different years, I was going to ask you from a well, first everybody asks this, and I'll get beat up if I don't ask this. What do you think about solo play? What's the possibility to do solo play for this insert game, 3D Days?
For two-handed solo, as you know, like two-handed solo is an expression that chess players use for when they rotate the board and play. Okay, perfect. The system is perfect for it. No special rules are included for solo play, but if you're willing to play two-handed solo, it plays easily in that way.
Great. And then if I'm playing, so since they're totally different situations between 42, 43, and of course everybody knows about 44, what would you say are the biggest differences that players are going to encounter, I guess, for both sides, from a gameplay strategy standpoint? What are they going to experience with each of these games?
Well, whenever I do an alternative history, I use for my modeling of both sides' capabilities the closest real-world event that took place. So for the 1942 scenario, the balance of forces is akin to that you saw in Northwest Africa from November 1942 through December when the Germans counterattacked. So it is not you shouldn't think of the Allies as being impotent. They're not, but there's going to be German aircraft up in the skies along with the Allied aircraft. There's my cat. I don't know, 20 pounds.
I cat. Yeah, I see the cat. I got dogs hidden behind me.
There's a lot of back and forth there, and the Allied player can screw up. I mean, he's going in against 5th Panzer Army. Yeah. And then there is a patent counter in that.
I saw a patent counter in 42 and 44. I think I saw it twice.
Yeah. Right. The idea is, patent emerges, and then you get combat bonuses from. Essentially, it gives a corps or an army stacked with patent enhanced capability. In 43, the thing is that's the wildest of the scenarios, depending on Hitler's reaction, what reinforcements he's going to send. So again, think there in terms of what you saw in Sicily and Salerno historically, strong German counterattack capabilities on hand, plus even more so enhanced, because the thing in southern Italy was that was far from the Luftwaffe bases of power. That's not the case here in 1943. If Hitler brings the Reich Air Defense Force on you, the sky can be filled with German planes, And then in 44, you can invade anywhere you want, not just Normandy. And so, you get the historical order of battles, and so you can experiment with, different landing sites. And so that, there's numerous options there.
Sounds like
the Luftwaffe has disappeared from the sky in that one, of course.
And I noticed in Smitty's developer notes, he thought the German infantry served as a nice bleed-off force if something goes wrong.
Well, by 44, all the Germans' combat power on the offense is concentrated in their few Panzer Corps, but the German infantry can still get the job done on the defense. So. And
do you agree with Smitty, the developer? He felt that the 1943 scenario was the most challenging to play.
Yes, well, it can be the easiest to play. If Hitler decides he's going to stick with East Front scenario, then you're pretty cool.
And then it's not much. There's not much to.
Yeah, that was the argument. The original.
I don't know. I guess he wasn't thinking that, because he said this was the most interesting of the 3. So he's probably not going with that Hitler option where they're all going east. So
that was the original debate. There was a historian named Dunn. I've got his book in the bibliography called Second Front Now, and he studied the situation, and he declared that the Allies really made a bonehead mistake by not invading in 43, because the balance of forces were such that they clearly would have broken through. But his assumption was that Hitler would not have changed his strategy in the East, that he would just say, we'll just keep fighting there and we'll do it. And the thing is, if you're going to give the Allies the option to change their mind and pick a new strategy, you've got to give Hitler the option to change his mind. And like I say, you know, what makes this valid, I think, is Eisenhower in his memo said he was frightened that Hitler would go over to a total concentrated defense in the east, forming the Riga-Odessa line, pick up 30 divisions, and spring at least 15 of those into the Western Front. You know, and I mean, if you think about the trouble we had historically in '44 in Normandy, imagine somewhat the same situation with another 15 Panzer divisions on hand.
Right.
You know, we'd still be fighting to take Saint-Lô today. You know.
Yeah. Well, were there? I always like to ask designers: was there any particular challenge or anything you're most proud of, as far as you talked about the roots of the game and the approach, systematic approach you took? Is there anything that happened during your journey of doing this game with the 3 different battles in it that you still remember to this day that you take away with this effort yourself personally?
Well, this is one of those. Sometimes I have a game idea where I had never even thought about it, and then it comes to me, and in like a month of intense work, I punch it out. You know, this was a game, on the other hand, going back to 1972 in the early 70s, undergrad, that I started thinking about it.
Wow.
And I kept looking for an opportunity. You know, I'm reading up on it, and I think, well, this is the way I have to do this. And then I think, then I come across another book. Oh, I didn't take into account that. And so over the course of about half a century,
yeah, amazing.
Finally, Bill Thomas says, "Why don't you just go ahead and do it?" You know, and so but all it took was 50 years of reading, and then it just jumped right out at me. You know.
Well, that's awesome. So again, so we're excited. So again, folks, at time of this recording here, this recorded session, the game is now being received. The issue is being received. So so hats off to you, Ty, on another Herculean effort. You've done so many great designs, especially for Paper Wars here, and also I think this. Yeah, please.
Just the one thing about the cover.
Sure.
This is another Paul Stuhlfeld montage cover. Now,
Yes.
what interests me about that, when I studied graphic composition back in school, they always taught me avoid montages because the eye doesn't know where to sit. And Paul loves montages. And the thing is, he's shown me how to do it well. And that is, you have to have a central image where you see the troops there right in the center. And then you montage around the rest of it. And so, like,
there's the landmass areas, right?
And
so
for decades,
that's amazing.
Avoid montage covers, and he's a master of montage covers. You know, so
yeah,
you're never too old to learn something.
It looks great. And this, I mean, this
the lion's share of the credit, how I mean, Paul comes up with a look at this. If it was just me, this would look like one of those 1969 mimeograph newsletters we used to put out back.
We'll do one of those. Bill will say, "Do it."
So all the credit goes to Paul on this for sure.
Yeah. Well, I think what folks hopefully will take away from this one, which is important to remind everybody, is there's a whole lot of other gaming material in this issue. We've got the great game here, 3 different situations unfolding on the tabletop, but gosh, we've got all these extra counters for these other games. We've got the analysis, Assault on Tobruk. We've got your Inkerman, American Bomber. Again, the list goes on and on of game support material, counters, K-scaled, all that stuff's in this one issue. So I hope folks don't forget, we've got the bonus die cut counters for these other 3 or 4 games are included with this one. So a lot of stuff in the one package. Absolutely. So you worked your tail off on this one because you got a lot of stuff in here. So a great issue, and thanks for covering the changes coming and some of the changes to the schedule. I think that's good for folks to know, down the road what's coming. But no, this was wonderful, Ty. Thank you so much for sharing with us, what's included in the issue, telling us more about the game, and I hope folks are excited to break it out on their tables and give it a try.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
All right, Bomba out.